Hi, today we're going to be building a Tauri app for Windows 11 ARM64. What I'm using is a Mac Mini, M1 chip on mine. It's an older one. That was cheap, used, and we're going to run Windows 11 on the Mac Apple Silicon with Windows 11 ARM. Okay, that 9 to 5 channel has a good article on how to get started with VMware. That was surprisingly easy. So here I've got a pretty clean Windows 11 starting up, and I just need to install the VMware tools to make the video a little bit bigger. Once this is installed, I can widen the screen so you can see it a little bit better. Then we'll go ahead with the Tauri prerequisites on this clean Windows 11 64-bit ARM. The goal of today is to not do any code changes, but just to be able to build the standard Tauri template and make sure that I've got all the prerequisites in to be able to build both a runnable exe as well as a nullsoft installer that installs and runs as a native ARM64. One of the prerequisites is the Windows C++ build tools, and I just installed the build tools and had some problems, so I don't know if it was related to that. So this time I'm going through and installing the whole Visual Studio with the C++ task. I wanted to get started with the Visual Studio because I know that excuse me, takes a long time. I've been finding that the documentation is pretty good. Even I can follow along on it. So here, instead of following that link to the build tools, I went ahead and just searched for Visual Studio. That brings down the installer. And one thing I wanted to show you guys, this system information shows Apple Silicon. I'm not sure if it would show like something else like Snapdragon for other systems, but it is the Windows 11 and ARM based processor. Again, that 9 to 5 Mac did a good job with that video, and that's hardware I'm running it on. So all you need is the desktop C++, and that brings in the ARM because that's what I'm currently running the Visual Studio installer on. So that should be everything you need. Then takes the long download. There's probably a lot of stuff that I don't need in there, but shotgun approach, simpler than trying to find out exactly what's needed. Then after that gets done installing, I did go to the website for the Rust app, and it does have an ARM separate download. We'll run that later. And after Rust is done, we can go to the node which also has a separate ARM64 architecture for Windows. I was debating whether or not to install PNPM, but I ran into some issues with that, so I was just going to stick with NPM. Just getting a few things ready for later, like a command prompt. Things slow down with when the Visual Studio installer is running. I think that was a glitch in the network, because my Visual Studio download stopped, installer stopped. And you don't need PowerShell. This is kind of an extra. I did cut out part of this install in a bit. So you may see that progress bar jump. I tend to like to have everything in one directory when we're installing the project, creating the project. Time for a cup of coffee, or a tea, or a warm-up. (34°F), as you notice in the bottom left corner. Pretty chilly for upstate New York, but poking on the computer is a little easier than digging ditches, as our old manager Ted Flanders used to say. He used to say, I only want you to work half days, 12 hours. They like to see people in the chairs. That was a long time ago, pre-COVID days. There we go. Time jump. And normally you'd probably only have to restart your computer, but I shut it down just so I could take a snapshot in VMware in case I had to go back to this point. Sorry, I'm not used to VMware that much, or the Mac. Just wanted to make sure I got a snapshot in there. And back at it. I don't know if you can hear some of the background noise, but that is a sump pump right below me, flushing some water out. I am not sitting on the toilet. Okay, so after Visual Studio comes Rust. Just checking the prerequisites. Windows, C++ tools, Rust. I think that's the main thing about differences between this and just regular Windows building of Tauri apps is different build tools with ARM64 and making sure that the default architecture is Apple or ARM. This shouldn't take too long. Then the next thing after that is Node, which brings in NPM. That doesn't take long. And with a new command prompt or shell. It's got the new environment variables. Now we create a project. npm. And I made a mistake. I should have started this over off the C drive Tauri directory instead of the system32. Not a good idea to keep your development files in system32. I suppose you could, but I think that would just lead to complications and deleting the wrong things. So all the defaults for creating the template. Then we go down a directory, do the npm install. And then a little bit confusing because it says Android in the text above in the command prompt, but actually, like over in the documentation on the left, you just have to run npm run Tauri dev. You don't need to do any init. Although I did see an error unable to parse 2.0 version, a couple of those you'll see in a second. Not sure what's up with that, but it did continue to build in the dev environment. So it could be a crate is actually unable to look at version 2.0, but seems to be okay as far as building without any other errors. And in Task Manager, the one column you can see is architecture, and you can see the ARM64 designation as a native ARM64 process. So the goal is that we're building a native ARM64 Tauri exe that shouldn't have any issues with it, with speed or anything for related to the translation layer, emulation layer. ARM64, that looks good. And it runs, that's also important. And the next thing we're going to do is just build of the installer, make sure the installer builds okay, runs okay, and installs the native ARM64 app. This takes a while too. Another coffee warm-up. Sounds like my daughter is here. She's talking to the cats and other people here. The background noise is the heater to keep the office warm when it's 34 degrees. Should be done pretty soon. Another couple minutes. Ah. There they are. I think the MSI, the documentation said, did not work on ARM64, so we're just going to go with the nullsoft one. And it said the nullsoft installer itself is x86, but it is installing the native ARM64. And it works. It's ARM64. Shortcut works. Listed as a registered installed app and can uninstall properly. Shortcut on the desktop is gone. That's the only test I was going to do. Ship it.